Hello everybody, I'm Bob Zybach. First time I talked for this group was 2013 on spotted owls, and things have got worse ever since. So I'm going to be talking about the Elliott State Forest, but not just about a state forest. This is about HCPs, federal lands, government control of our property. And the Elliott is an opportunity right now. You don't read about it in the papers, you don't hear about it on the radio, but things have changed dramatically between the environmental groups that have been filing lawsuits for the last 30 years and between the people that actually work for a living. There's an opportunity now, things have changed. Senate Bill 1546, who here has heard about Senate Bill 1546? Yep. That's the problem. How many know about HCPs? Okay, that's the problem. HCPs are habitat conservation plans. The federal government devised them about 30 years ago. We had the Endangered Species Act come in the 1970s or 80s, and it was followed by the Equal Access to Justice Act, EAJA. How many's heard about that?
What is it, EA?
EAJA. It's, what it means is that when nonprofits sue the federal government and they prevail, then taxpayers pay for the lawyers and the damage fees. And the EAJA for the last 30 years has been used by Oregon environmental organizations to shut down our forest industries. They've also, after our forests predictably burn, which me and other people have been predicting for 30 years, they've also shut down any salvage logging. So the result has been in our rural communities, 30 and 40 years ago when I was in college and starting a business and so on, 50 years ago, we didn't have anybody living in a tent on a sidewalk. We had good schools, we had good parks, we had people that owned sawmills and logging businesses and reforestation businesses and sawmills that contributed to local communities. We had good schools, we had good parks, and those aren't an old guy remembering back to his youth. Those are documented facts in videos, in newspapers, and photographs. And things have changed. Things have changed for the worse. From 1952 until 1989, we had one serious wildfire in Oregon. 1966, Oxbow Burn is about 40,000 acres. That was it. So my PhD is in the study of catastrophic wildfires in Oregon State. And the reason I got interested in that is because about 1987, we had the Silver Complex. And then in 2002, we had the Biscuit Fire, which reburnt the Silver Complex like me and other people predicted. But by that time, most of the Oregon people that worked in the forest were out of work because of lawsuits beginning in 1990 and continuing through today. They just shut down a BLM site just a month or so ago. And those lawsuits are coming from the same small handful of individuals, the same small groups of nonprofit organizations for the last 30 or 40 years. And we've let them do it. We've let a handful of environmental groups, they're affiliated with the Democrat Party, affiliated with Portland and Eugene, ruin most of Western Oregon's small communities, the ones that had sawmills and logging firms and reforestation firms, now have bad schools, poor education, shoddy parks, and they got burnt out timber surrounding their towns ready to burn again. We all know that's true because all we have to do is take a drive in the woods. So this is about the Elliott. Hopefully it's about something that some of you can take action on and follow through on. Maybe this group is one that can start addressing this problem. So far we've had one group in 30 years, Oregon Natural Resources Institute, ONRI, It's about 5 people or 10 people that do anything. And they've educated the public to some degree as to what these HCPs are. It's a federal takeover of all of our creeks and rivers and fish and timberlands. And when they take it over, when they make an HCP on your property, you get compensated by other taxpayers. And at the same time, you're putting people out of work. And at the same time, there's no scientific evidence, zero, that these HCPs have had a single success. Not a single bird, not a single seabird, not a single fish has been saved. And we've spent billions of dollars, we put tens of thousands of people out of work, and we've cost our schools hundreds of millions of dollars in this effort to create HCPs, which nobody knows about. So these 3 men here are people I worked with on the Elliott the last, I will introduce them. This is Wayne Giesy. I worked with him for 30 years. He died when he was 99. The last 3 or 4 years of his life, we worked together on the Elliott. We put together Oregon Websites and Watersheds Project, Inc., a nonprofit, in 1996, specifically to work with rural kids, rural school kids and teachers, learning about forestry, about timber management, about wildlife management, about cultural resource management. He lived till he was 99, worked right up till the end. There's Jerry Phillips. If you lived in Coos Bay, you'd know who Jerry Phillips is. He managed the Elliott Forest he started work there in 1956, straight out of Oregon State, and he retired there. I wrote an article about him. It's in my current book called The Elliott, which I don't have a copy of, but you can get it on Amazon. It's a collection of my 22 writings about the Elliott, spotted owls, marbled murrelets, coho, all the things that are affecting us. It's an anthology. It just came out a few weeks ago, and I had one copy that I gave my grandkids, and we got some on order. But it's got a story about, it's got one about Wayne Giesy, and it's got another one about Jerry Phillips. He wrote the history of the Elliott in 1996. He's an absolute expert on the history of the Elliott and the management of its forests. And the third person is David Gould, which you haven't heard about him. His family settled the Elliott in 1884. His great-grandfather, George Gould, built a complex, sawmill, bee house, orchard, out in the middle of nowhere. It was called the Big Burn in those days. Marbled murrelet habitat at that time was essentially old growth and burnt second growth timber. So not at all like they described. There's the apple tree from the original orchard, and then back is the rose bush next to the house. And then in 1990, these guys are all working in the forest industry. They're all experts in the field. And then the spotted owl came in. That man, this is 1990, is in Northern California. He's got a mouse in his hand. He gives a bird call, and within 3 minutes, the spotted owl comes down and takes a mouse. The man taking the photographs learned the bird call, and for the next 2 or 3 days, he located 24 or 25 nesting owls, a guy named ONRI, all in second growth. They are not an old growth dependent species. But, and they aren't too afraid of people. So here's some statistics from 1990 when the spotted owl flew in until 2016, and forestry related jobs in 1990, 50,000, 2016, 25,000, it's probably less now. So we lose 25,000 jobs. Federal government lost 6,000 jobs, but state and local jobs picked up 46,000 jobs. State and local government education, or indoctrination as it happens now, picked up 34,000, 46,000, 34,000, 75,000 government jobs, collecting tax revenues, and a loss of 25,000 in the woods that used to pay for them. So that's the effect of spotted owls. It's been billions and billions of dollars, and it's been effect on forests. Here's the Elliott. Here's 1990, and we'll look at this graph again a little bit at the end. And then here's Jerry Phillips, was running the Elliott. You might have trouble seeing it. The green line is 75 million board feet per year. That's what the Elliott grows. So if we were doing sustained yield, we would be logging 75 million feet a year. In the 1970s and 80s, 70-year-old second growth Douglas fir, they were logging 50 million feet a year. We're calling now 50 million feet a year, and then we can balloon it up to 75 million if there's a problem. This line here you can't see because it's white. It's 17 million feet. That's what Oregon State was going to log. Here's what's actually been sold and logged since the spotted owl, the red line. And it's down to nothing. It's costing millions of dollars a year for lawyers and for carbon credits, and has put 400 loggers and people dependent on loggers out of work. One forest, 80,000 acres. You can multiply it by all the other forests in the western United States. The difference between the green and the red is the amount of fuel that's building up, and it will certainly, there's no doubt about it, the history's clear, lead to a catastrophic wildfire, just like we've been having on our federal lands. So Jerry wrote a book about it in 1996 about the Elliott, and the Oregon State and Department of State Lands has had 5 years and millions of dollars to research the Elliott. I've been writing about it for 30 years. I've got a PhD in the topic. I wrote specifically on the Elliott in '93. They didn't cite Jerry's work. They didn't read his book. They didn't talk to me. We tried to work with them, but they're more interested in shutting the woods down and keeping them shut down than they are about people working. So here's what I did. This is from my current article. I pass out a few magazines here. Logan or Chris, I've sent them links, and they can share them to anybody that wants them, but this is a series of magazine articles I've written over the last 12 years, 22 of them on the Elliott, and this is what comprises the book that I just put together. So part of what I've written is on my research. My research is based on the history of Oregon Coast Range from 1491 to 1951 with a focus on catastrophic wildfires. And this shows the pattern of Indians that lived here for at least hundreds of years, probably fairly stable, but people were here for 10,000 years. Tribes are like everybody, like today, come and go and change boundaries, but each one of these colors here is a different language group. So the Elliott is right here in the Kusan language group. It's Lower Umpqua, Siuslaw, Coos Indians, Millicoma, and Hannes. But you can see the whole area was occupied by people. And what the modern people, Jerry Franklin and those people are saying is, we have a non-declining, even flow, naturally functioning ecosystem. They made me memorize that. That is an imaginary condition that somehow is supposed to be our ideal, and it means that no people are there. And they've got the misconception that if nobody's there, it'll somehow magically turn into an old-growth forest with flocks of spotted owls and marbled murrelets and coho and all kinds of neat stuff, and no people. So it's wonderful. That's what they're fighting for. So here's some examples of people. Salish people from Tillamook, Chinook woman tattooed up like a San Francisco street person now. The Kalapuya in the valley, you can see a small fir tree in the background. They kept it burnt clean, millions of acres in savanna, oak savanna condition. Yakona Indians, you can see saw marks on the log, but this is present-day Newport area, and they're wearing Christian clothing. So this is as they're first being displaced. They've got some of the traditional ornaments, some minor tattooing, but the transition's in place. And here's what they did with large wood products. This is near the present-day Reed's Fort. This is Northern California. This is up near Vancouver, Washington. This is Salmon River area. This is a giant log. This could go out in the ocean. They could go seal hunting with it. Here's a giant lodge. 30 or 40 people lived in there full time. Here's a family unit. 10, 20 people lived in them. Look at the logs and the planks they took to build these materials. There wasn't any dead wood around. There wasn't a bunch of dead snags. There were people using wood, and every day they cooked with wood. There wasn't a bunch of dead wood on the floor. All of that stuff about dead wood and snags being signs of a healthy forest, the technical word is bullshit. That we've been sold a bill of goods that this is somehow healthy. It's like having a bunch of dead and dying people in a town and saying, that's a healthy town. No, it's not. It's something that just got invented and sold to us, that there's no people, 400-year-old trees, snags, dead wood everywhere, it's happy salamanders.
Oh,
It's all nuts.
wow.
Here's Toledo, Oregon, in about 1880s, I think, I can't remember.
Wow.
It was all burnt, the Yaquina Burn, 1868, 1849. What was burnt? Largely second growth. They're big though, because trees grow fast on the coast, so people said they're 300 or 500 or 700 years old. More BS. Here's the heart of the Elliott. David Gould we saw earlier, his great-grandfather built this place. Here's the riparian area, right? HCP, they say it's old trees, it's logs, it's brush. That's nuts. People live there. They put an orchard there. There wasn't any trees. There wasn't any reed canary grass. There wasn't any Himalayan blackberries. We're being sold a nonsense, anti-human story, and it's caused a whole lot of devastation over the last 30 years.
Wow.
If you look at the bench, these are large trees. A few of them might be old growth. You can't see it on the hill. You'll see it in the next picture. All second growth reprod, crown fire, 1770s, 1840s, 1868, 1879. The whole Elliott burned off. And they're trying to do the same thing again. There's Indians here, they kept a prairie, they died off because of disease. So here's another view of the same place. We can see there's a few big trees. They might be 250 or 300 years old. There's a lot of reprod, 30, 50, 70 years old. And it crowned out, and just like what's happening now, the second growth killed the old growth. This is critical habitat. Spotted owls and marbled murrelets really need this to persist. It's up to us to make sure that we can keep this kind of condition going. I'm going to sell everybody a bridge that believes that. Here's another picture, same thing. Here's the Elkhorn Ranch. If you look out over the riparian area, this is the West Fork of the Millicoma. It's like almost all of the western western Oregon, in the 1880s. It was all burnt off. There wasn't a bunch of old growth. That's just a lie. The area around the riparian area where we got HCPs, where they're trying to make nobody log, nobody mess, people lived there for thousands of years. They cooked, they had campfires, they built houses. There wasn't anything there. We can see here, this is the West Fork of the Millicoma. There's some small alder coming in. That's because the Indians aren't there to burn it off or to gather firewood. So here's this place called Burnt Ridge. It's now a wildlife habitat. These ladies on a horse are coming back from the 1902 Portland Exposition.
Wow.
And you can see the trees are burned off, and you can see they burned at least twice if you're looking at it. The ones that are charred like this have been killed in an earlier fire and then burnt once they turn into firewood. But we're looking at 18, 20 stems an acre, not 300 like we got now. It filled into a brush field that the Indians had. White settlers came in and they kept burning it off, but they weren't burning it off for grazing land, they were burning it off to hunt deer, just like the Indians did. We've got eyewitness accounts of people that did that. That's critical habitat. Here's some more critical habitat. The first picture was in the center of the Elliott. The second picture was to the southwest. It was in the Elliott. This is on to the east of the first picture. And that landslide happened in 1994. The people heard it. Nobody was around to see it. But that's a typical landslide. The Elliott's really steep. In 1996, those that can remember or were here, we had real bad rains. And we had 90-some slides just on the northern part of the Elliott. So landslides are really common there. If you know Loon Lake, it was created by a landslide. It's a huge lake.
Oh, wow.
This created Gould Lake. So you probably can't see it, but this is a boat. This is an island. These are the tops of the riparian area, the HCP, and these are the tops of young Douglas fir trees growing in to that area. And then we can see the second row of trees that were killed along the edges. So here's a few years later, and the riparian tops have died. The brush has grown up, and we're starting to get, we can see the snags, we're starting to get Douglas fir in there. Critical marble murrelet habitat. So what can we do about it? Mike Newton was studying riparian areas, streams, and he took a bunch of measures. Oregon State did a really nice project, which we're trying to get them to replicate. Paired watershed study, where they cut one right down to the banks, like we did for thousands of years, and then they left a riparian area, a zone on others, like they're started doing since 1990. And he measured the temperatures, the water flow, and he was lucky. He got a fish biologist in there. Now, those of us that have done some fishing know that some of these spots attract fish. They like the warm water, they like the food, and we like to catch fish. You can't see them very well, but there's about a dozen trout there in full sun.
Wow.
So here's a chart. And when Mike was doing his work, he was lucky to have a fish biologist there. Here's a clear cut. There's the volume of fish in a clear cut that they measured. Here's a partial cut. And the higher the graphs, the more fish, the more bulk, the larger they are. And here's another partial cut with the riparian area. So partial cut, clear cut, and here's the undisturbed areas in between, what they call recovery. So it's really clear. Where you have sun, you have food, you have fish, and where you have real heavy shade, you have fewer fish, or smaller fish, they've got less food. So the government, the federal government, wants you now to shade out all of the riparian areas and not log them, and they will give you taxpayer dollars if you do that. So that's why the Elliott's important right now. Wayne, Giesy, and I put together this plan in 2017 before Oregon State got involved, and we divided the land up into ancient tribal ownerships and 4 major Coho runs. At that time, we were saying, okay, there's forest wars. Let's keep half the land as a wilderness and take good measurements of all the stream temperatures and the fish populations and the spotted owls and the seabirds that come in there, keep really good records and compare the difference between actively managed area and the wilderness. Let's take the environmentalists on one side and the timber beasts on the other, and let's see who really ends up with the better situation by social measures. We were shut down and it turned into a research project. Our proposal, Wayne had met personally with the governor. We were working with Ted Ferrioli with the Republican Party. We were working with directly with the Department of State Lands that manages the Elliott. And we were working with the president of Oregon State, Ed Ray, meeting with him personally. We're meeting with the dean of Oregon State, who was dying at the time. But we were making this proposal, and that quick, we had Democrats move in. Brown appointed a Democrat to head the Department of State Lands, a environmental lawyer, Jeff Huntington, he's in the articles, somehow educated at University of Oregon. He was founder of Environmental Law and Litigation Journal, which is now 40 years old. Somehow came to represent the OSU College of Forestry in this negotiation on the Elliott. Nobody else, no deans, no presidents. The people that had made it possible got replaced with an environmental lawyer due to circumstances. He is now representing COTEC personally to continue the same process, but without Oregon State. Let's see here. So here's the Oregon State plan. I call it Acronyms and Polygons. It's a computer game, and every time they do it, it doesn't work. That's what they've done to the federal lands. It burns up. So they've created this semi-wilderness area here, right next to occupied towns. That's what we call building a bonfire. That's supposed to be critical habitat. They took maize and lime, we divided it up into 25 named subbasins. They turned it into 115, so it looks a lot more complicated. But they only gave them 6 colors. So the 25 subbasins now have 6 types, and then they gave them 2 acronyms, a CWE and an MO2 or something. And so it's got 2 acronyms and 6 colors representing 105 or 115 subbasins. And then they're going to do piddling around on some of those for some reason. That's what they're going to do. They're going to set the whole thing on fire. They're going to put everybody out of work, and they're going to pretend like they're doing science. That's what happens when lawyers think they can manage it for us. So here's the reality. Here's Jerry Phillips' book. You can't quite see it. Here's the Elliott. He called this an 1868 fire as an 1879 fire. It burnt through the 1868 fire, just like the Kalmiopsis. I predicted that it would burn again if something wasn't done after the silver complex. It's burnt 3 times since then. These areas, the Tillamook burnt in 1933. It burned earlier in 1918. Then it burned again in 39. Then it burned again in 45. Then it burned again in 51. Every 6 years, they called it a 6-year jinx. These areas, just like all the snags now, just like the North Umpqua, keep burning. And they go from a green tree filled with water to a snag, air-dried firewood filled with pitch. So these fires are hotter, more devastating than they were in the first place. And they keep happening. If we don't get the snags out of there like they finally did on the Tillamook, they'll keep happening. They're predictable. They are not climate change. The climate's been about the same for 500 years. That is just another flat-out lie. It's like saying that the Elliott is 40% old growth. Technically, again, that's just pure bullshit. We have to stop listening to that crap. It's not true. The newspapers put it out. Oregon Wild puts it out. The radio reports it. The TV says 40% old growth. It's less than 1% old growth. They say it won't burn. Of course it'll burn. Fuel burns. So what happened is when we found out that Oregon State was going to manage it, me and Jerry and Wayne and David got together in the Elliott. This is July 2017, and we said, what are we going to do about this? The politics are against us. The Democrats and some self-proclaimed Republicans are saying that we've got to stop logging, and they've got their way. They're going to form a research force. They're going to put everybody out of work. They've already put everybody out of work. And so our decision was, let's take our nonprofit 501c3 Oregon websites and start educating the public, because people don't know what an HCP is. They don't know about the Elliott. They don't know what they're doing on the federal government. So this was taken that day. I'm the photographer, and those 3 guys are there at what was called Silver Creek Memorial Grove. Jerry built it from Weyerhaeuser land to preserve 40 or 50 acres of old growth. And it wasn't very much on the forest, and he was trying to save it. So what we did is we got together with Southwest Oregon Community College. There's Jerry and David and me, and Tasha Livingstone, now her last name is, I forgot it. And a bunch of students, and so this is 2017, Davison, that's her last name now. And we're studying the Elliott. We're looking at, because it's a recreation class, a recreation plan. One had never been made before on the Elliott. They didn't want people recreating there because they wanted to produce funding for the Common School Fund. And they produced, under Jerry's management, a few $100 million and 400 local jobs. That's what got shut down. So the kids came up with a recreation area, and it was slightly larger than the Elliott, but went up to the highway where the Elliott does. It went to 101, and this is dunes over here, and then it followed up along the Coos River and the Millicoma to Golden and Silver Falls. So that's the recreation area, and the first recreation plan that the kids put together. And I've got that as a chapter in the book. So we studied different recreational things. We had David Gould there, we had Jerry Phillips there, we did field trips, we studied hunting. There's a Gould family member, probably about 1900, with a trophy buck. She probably shot it herself, or maybe George Gould did, and she just was posing with it. But that's the kind of hunting they did. And they did it commercially. They shipped hides and smoked meat down to San Francisco. And here's a couple of the students. The one on the left wasn't one of my students, but that's her first grouse in the Elliott. And the one on the right took her friend's picture, and then her dad took a picture of her first bear, probably her last bear. But that's also on the Elliott. So hunting is still going on there. It's still a recreational activity there. But with all of the Douglas fir growing in, the wildlife is diminishing. It's not a biodiversity type of situation. A Douglas fir shades out everything. So here's our second class. There's Jerry and Tasha and me and David and a bunch of students. And they went through the plan and they reviewed it. And they looked at it and they refined it. Meantime, Oregon State spent about $1 million on a couple of professors and some carbon credit study or other, or something. So there's where he took the first picture was the Silver Creek Memorial Grove. There's me and Jerry and David, and the sign says Jerry Phillips Reserve. When we were touring in 2017, David told us a story that when Jerry Phillips set aside that land in the first place, it was a joke. 40 or 50 acres of old growth, and not going to log it, and going to take it away from the school trust fund. And at that time, those of us who are old enough can remember Henry Weinhard's private reserve.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this became Jerry Phillips Private Reserve. It was a joke. And then me and David started talking to some local politicians, and it's Jerry Phillips Reserve now. The students, you can't fit very clear, but we mapped out all the roads, 550 miles of roads and trails. When they evaluated the Elliott, they didn't even include that value in the evaluation. 550 miles of roads and trails is millions of dollars. Didn't even get included when they evaluated it. Some of these, most of the roads and trails follow old Indian trails. A lot of them were created by the 3 Cs during the 1930s. So to be a cultural resource, it's got to be 50 years old. So 90 years ago, we had young kids build roads, and we've got good records on it. Those are nationally, historically important. In the 1950s, we did cat logging. Those cat roads are nice trails. It's illegal now. Those are historically important. It's over 50 or 60 years old. You can take mountain bikes down them or hike down them. Kids can go down them, but they're letting them all grow up and fall apart. So in 2020, you might remember we had a pandemic. And so at that time, we couldn't take field trips with the classes. I couldn't give lectures. We couldn't work with them directly. So we had to go online. We had to do distance education. We had to do virtual field trips. So that's Mackenzie Peters and me, and we're on Zoom. And this is a lesson for the kids. In the background is the Cougar Pass lookout, which is still there, but needs to be renovated. And we on a zero budget with all the shops closed and an iPhone, we started putting together field trips and lectures so that the kids could continue learning about the Elliott without actually ever having to go there. So one of the things we did, there's Kinsey videotaping David and Jerry. Wayne had died by this point in time. We recorded 25 hours of oral history interviews with these guys. Oregon State never talked to them once. 5 years, millions of dollars, Department of State Lands, State Land Board, Governor, nobody. Wayne met with the governor a few times and talked to her about it, but when they started spending the money and doing the research, all of the experts, and I'm going to put myself in that pocket, we got avoided like the plague. They didn't want to have anything to do with people that knew about forest management. They were just interested in the science, quotes, that says that HCPs and preserves are what's needed. So here's what happened to the kids. Instead of having real kids out there, we have the pictures of the real kids, and the kids during the pandemic got to watch pictures of people that used to go out in the woods. And here's the chart I said I was going to show you again. If you look at each one of these points, here's the Columbus Day storm, 1962. It blew down 70 million feet of second growth. That caused about 300 million feet to get logged because they had to build roads to get to it to salvage. And so you can see it's moving up into the green line area. So here in 1988, they made a plan for the Elliott, and they decided that with the potential for a 1996 flood event, or an 1879 fire, or a 1962 hurricane, that they've got to have some slack. So they thought 50 million feet a year is good. Jerry retired right at this line here. At the same time, found 3 or 4 spotted owls on the Elliott. So these dots here are HCPs. And this dot here is the lawsuit that followed, because as the environment said, they were grossly defying the law. They were breaking the law. It was all illegal. They shouldn't be logging. It was really important to save those marble muralets that we go broke. So that's what they did. HCPs, lawsuits, and here's where Oregon State took over their research for us. Fortunately, after 4 or 5 years of being manipulated by the enviros, the president of Oregon State in November wrote a letter, said, "We're not going to participate in this anymore. It's a money loser. You can't make money at 17 million feet a year, and now you're doing these carbon credits. You're trying to force that down our throats." And the person that was doing that, Jeff Huntington, was the same person that represented Oregon State when they first set this up. So now we turned on them and said, we don't need Oregon State anymore. They're meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. None of you know about that. I was lucky to find out, and I hate mornings, but that's when they're going to be making the plans and what they're going to do with the Elliott. Bob Salinger from Portland Audubon that filed the suit is in charge, running the committee, as he's been doing, and they are looking for smaller, fewer people, and they are building a bonfire, and I don't know if they care about that or not. They just care about the political power, the attention, and the potential jobs they're getting from it. So that graph right there tells the whole story of what happens with HCPs everywhere, but it's specific to the Elliott. And it right now is why there's a good opportunity to be heard, to let the new governor, the new tribal chair, the new president of Oregon State, the new dean, know that this is unacceptable, that it's time to put people back to work. It's time to maintain our roads again. And we can do it in such a way with the Giesy plan. What was proposed 7 years ago is, let's use it as a scientific test for HCPs. Instead of having the government tell us that we have to be 230 feet off the riparian area, which is nothing more than a government regulation that takes us off the land, that takes us away from the management of our fish and our timber, puts it in federal control. The Fish and Wildlife people, they're saying we need to do that instead, and they're formulating plans in the morning. And then on the 13th, when we had the state land board, the one that found out that they couldn't do Senate Bill 1546, and they will not allow public testimony, they won't allow written testimony, which they usually do. They're going to have a report from the committee that meets in the morning that tells them what needs to be done on the Elliott next. So between tomorrow morning and the 13th is a real opportunity to let the government know what you think about putting everybody out of work and doing it behind closed doors and calling it science.
Where is that 8 o'clock meeting being held? In Salem?
Probably. There's a link to it, and it's the State Land Board, but it's not the State Land Board site, it's the Department of State Land site, and it's buried way deep. I think it's a Microsoft, and I think they send you the codes, and I can send Chris and Logan links if they can forward them, but I think it's a really important meeting to attend.
But it's not in the Capitol, it's at one of the,
I'm not sure where they're holding it.
yeah, they didn't hold the last ones in the Capitol.
Yeah. Well, this is Department of State Lands, this isn't the State Land Board.
Right.
Who's running the meeting?
What's that?
Who's running the meeting? Who's calling the meeting? Who's running the meeting?
Well, the meeting's probably Vicki Walker, a Democrat appointee that she's probably not,
Government. Okay.
she's probably technically running it. Bob Salinger, Portland Audubon, that filed the lawsuits, he's the guy in charge.
Okay.
And Jeff Huntington is now working personally for the lawyer. He was working for Oregon State, then he's working for the Department of State Lands, now he's working for the governor. His whole focus is on keeping the Elliott shut down. So,
So it's supposed to be a public meeting.
tomorrow is, yes, but they just don't tell the public about it, that's why nobody knows about it. And we do get an opportunity to say something, but the State Land Board meeting that makes the decisions closed to the public. It's just gonna be informational, and it's gonna be information coming from the meeting in the morning. The whole thing is how they've been running things. The whole thing is behind closed doors, in secret, with acronyms.
Well, what's the opportunity for us to affect if it's kind of a closed circle? It's an unpublished.
Respond. They don't even know we're out here. What ONRI's been doing is, I think they're gonna put together a petition maybe, but they've been doing Facebook,
Yeah.
and that reaches 8 people or 38 people. So,
Well,
No, ONRI's actually pretty big.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
Well, but who reads Jen's stuff is a small amount of people, is the problem.
well, the fact is though, the governor, the secretary of state, and the treasurer are the 3 people that make the decisions. Bob Salinger and Jeff Huntington are the 2 environmental lawyers that are telling them what their decisions will be. There's 4, 5, or 6 people that are shutting this down that have been doing it for the last decade, but basically the same group for the last 30 years. It's Portland Democrats, and I'm not a Republican or Democrat, but that's just who they are.
If people only knew how bad the Audubon Society was.
Absolutely.
The Audubon Society has shut down the Elliott, cost 400 local jobs, about 100 to 150 million to our schools, and millions of dollars to local economy, and that's one forest. And it's not just the Audubon, it's Willamette River Keepers, it's Cascadia Wild, it's Oregon Wild, and then on a federal level, it's I can't think of their name, they got another acronym, Biological Diversity, something or other.
Wow.
Yeah, so here's the actual Elliott. They're telling you it's 40% old growth, and we gotta preserve it. These are the age classes. The red numbers here, which you can't quite see, I just wrote in a couple days ago. This is Jerry Phillips' work from the 1990s. These are the age classes of the trees in the Elliott, and he went through with a crew and they poured thousands of trees in the 1950s, so they knew better than anybody. That's why Oregon State went and talked to them, the ages of the trees. So here's the ages of the trees in the 1990s. I changed the numbers to current 2024. Right here is the Columbus Day storm. All of these trees here are plantations. They will not turn into any kind of habitat that these people are describing. Plantations are unprecedented in the history of forestry. My crews did 80,000 acres of them. These trees here, if we want wildlife habitat, they got to be removed. And they're 60 years old now. That's merchantable. 30 and 40 years ago it wasn't, but 60 and 50-year-old trees could be removed. Here is the Coos Fire of 1868. Here is the 1879 Big Burn. So these are 120, 130, 140. In 1945, Weyerhaeuser said those trees were immature second growth. They are second growth. We wouldn't call them immature now, we call them mature second growth. They are second growth. Here are the trees that seeded them in, 160, 170, 180, 186 years old. Here's old growth over here, there isn't any. It's all a lie. These animals aren't dependent on old growth or they wouldn't be there. This is second growth. This is plantation. The Elliott is a managed forest, it's a working forest. Everything they've been telling us about critical habitat and non-declining even flow is bullshit. There's the reality. So there's Wayne Giesy. He worked on the Elliott the last 3 or 4 years of his life with me. Me and Wayne worked together 30 years. He's talking to Jim Petersen being interviewed there. Wayne won a national award from the Society of American Foresters with a high school graduate degree. You have to have a college degree to join the Society of American Foresters, but they realized that Wayne, who went to World War II instead of college, had done so much in the field of forestry that he deserved a national award, and he got a state award. He had to go back to Virginia to get it. There he's talking with Jim Petersen, and he's describing how we can manage the Elliott in such a way that we can learn about HCPs, we can learn about wilderness, and we don't put anybody out of work. There's Jerry Phillips, and if you read the chapter about him, he liked to make people laugh. That's his 90th birthday, and he's not laughing, but all his kids and grandkids are. They've got their Jerry Phillips masks on. So, and then there's David, and with Jen Haneker, yeah. We're at a rally about a year or two ago for ONRI, and Jen and David took to each other just immediately. David was active to the end, so we got Jerry kidding around and being interviewed. We got me talking to you guys. We got Wayne that's left things behind, and right up till the end there, David is actively involved in politics. Now on January 1st of this year, David has just turned 81, and he fell and hit his head and died. His wife tried to resuscitate him. He's out in the country for 45 minutes or an hour. A neighbor came over and was helping her. And then ambulance about an hour after that. They tried for 45 minutes. He played football in Oregon State. Can anybody remember the 62 Beavers? Damn them all. He was on that team. So did Terry Baker. So, and there's Jerry's point of view, where we saw the pictures of them by the sign and pictures I took of them earlier. It's right here. And there's the old growth. And here's a bunch of hemlock recrod. And there's one of our classes from Southwest Oregon Community College leaving the Elliott. Jerry said that's his favorite view. That's what we call it, Jerry's point of view. Oh. And I have brought 3 or 4 magazines. There's those 3 guys on the cover of the magazine. My book has got those 3 guys on it. The story of the Elliott is a story of those 3 guys. That's all I got.
You know, I just want to ask a question. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Still trying to figure out who should we write to, talk to?
The governor.
The governor, okay. I wrote that
She's on the state land board.
Oh, she is.
And Tobias Reed, vote him out. That guy conspired with Enviros to do this.
Oh,
And I don't know the Secretary of State right now. Vicki Walker's a waste of time. She's at Department of State lands, but she's just manipulated by these other people. The people that have caused this to happen, Jeff Huntington and Bob Salinger, you don't know their names because they're behind the scenes. They're a lot smarter than the rest of us. They're environmental lawyers. So they've been manipulating this whole thing for years. So it's just a small handful of people that have put thousands of people out of work, cost our schools hundreds of millions of dollars. And we're sitting here whining about it years later, and they're in control. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.